Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a Walt Disney World versus Disney Cruise Line video. Now this video has taken me a long time. It's taken me days and days and hours of work to pull together because I didn't want to share just my perspective. I wanted to make sure to share the perspectives of some of you. And so on my Instagram, I asked for other families or couples or individuals or groups of friends who had also been on both a Walt Disney World trip and on a Disney cruise to send in some of their thoughts about which one they prefer, what are the pros and cons to each, and all those kinds of things, which we will get to in just a minute here. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Blair. My husband and I got back from our first Disney cruise a few weeks ago, and so there's been lots of Disney cruise vlogs and information live on my channel. I also have lots of Walt Disney World vlogs, so I will put a playlist to all of my Disney vlogs and videos, both from Walt Disney World and the cruise, if you're interested in checking those out. Before I jump into this video, I want to talk about why I'm creating this video, because in a lot of ways, comparing Walt Disney World to Disney Cruise Line is like comparing apples to oranges. And so I know some people are gonna say, well, how can you compare them? They're so different. And I totally agree. They are completely different types of trips, completely different types of vacations. But to me, I really highly value vacationing with family. I think it's such a special way to make memories that you just don't make in your day-to-day life by getting out of your normal comfort zone, going into something completely different, and just making those memories are so precious to me. And so to me, if you're spending precious time and lots of money, as is the case when you're going on almost any Disney trip, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing for you and for your family. And so I just hope that this is an informative video and can help you make the decision if you are torn between Walt Disney World or going on a Disney cruise. Of course, Disneyland is also an option, but I personally have not been to Disneyland yet. Hopefully we'll get there someday soon, and so I can't throw that into the mix, although some of the responses mentioned Disneyland as well. Another reason why I am making this video is because after I put up all of my Disney cruise vlogs, I started getting dozens of questions of which were all the same, which was, which one is better, or which do you prefer? Would you go to Walt Disney World first, or would you go back on a cruise first? I'm trying to decide for my family, and again, like I said, when you're spending lots of money and you're taking time off work and taking time out of your normal day-to-day life, you wanna make sure that you're doing the right thing for you and your family. So that's that, but I just wanna give the massive disclaimer that I am trying to be as fair and balanced with this video as possible. I'm just sharing the information that I've gathered. I'm not perfect. This is not gonna be super scientific. This is more like anecdotal evidence supporting one side or the other, and so please don't freak out. Just remember, we're talking about Disney, and I understand that this is in a lot of ways comparing apples to oranges, but for a lot of families who are looking to go on a Disney vacation, the two options are Disney World or a Disney cruise. So to jump in, I have literally created, because I'm a crazy person, a 5-page document that has 42 responses on it from people and families who have been on both a Disney cruise and who have been to Walt Disney World. So what I did was on Instagram, I put out a call and I said, if you have been to both on a cruise and to Disney World, send me a message and I'm gonna send you 5 questions. Actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. So my first question was, tell me about your family makeup, meaning is it 2 adults and 2 kids? Is it 3 adults and 1 kid? Is it just 2 adults? That kind of thing. Tell me the pros that you see to Walt Disney World. Tell me the cons that you see to Walt Disney World. Tell me the pros and cons that you see to Disney Cruise Line. And the very last question was, which one would you choose? Oh, and then I did have a 7th, which was, do you have anything else that you want to add? But let's just jump right in, where I'm gonna just share with you what were the clear patterns in these answers. So I just want to talk about what came up often in each of the categories. So the first category is Walt Disney World pros. So these are the things that are reasons why you would want to do Walt Disney World, what makes it a great vacation, what makes it a great destination for your family. Something that people said a lot was that there's just so much to do. There are so many options. Of course, between the 4 parks, plus Disney Springs, plus all of the resorts, there are dozens and dozens of restaurants. There are so many different rides. There are a whole bunch of different shows. So that came up a lot, where people mentioned that there's just always something to do. There's so much to do. There's so many options. There's water parks. I forgot to even mention that. So that's something that came up all the time. Also, a lot of people said that the nostalgia of Disney World, and it's a place where they've always had family memories. So that is a huge pro to going on a Walt Disney World vacation, because it's something that they grew up doing, and so it feels really nostalgic and magical to them in that way. A lot of people mentioned that there are thrill rides in Walt Disney World, and that's a pro, because if you enjoy going on roller coasters, for example, there's obviously not any roller coasters on a cruise, and so that was a pro to going to Walt Disney World. A lot of people mentioned how Disney World has so many options for food. There are just so many restaurants. There are table service restaurants, signature dining restaurants, character meals, quick service, there are little coffee stands, there are popcorn stands, there are just so many options. So that was mentioned quite a lot, that people liked how many options there were for food. Of course, the rides, people really enjoy the rides. A few people mentioned that they loved Magical Express, which is the transportation system that goes between the resorts and the parks. And a lot of people mentioned that that was a super easy way to get around. Overall, the number one pro could be encompassed by saying that the pro to Walt Disney World is that there is so much. There are almost endless things to see, to do, to ride, to eat, to watch. That was the number one pro that was repeated many, many times, was that there's just so much to do. Now, let's move over to the cons of Walt Disney World and some of the patterns that I saw throughout these responses of what the cons to going to Walt Disney World were. Of course, the crowds were a huge con that was mentioned like at least a dozen times or more on here, where there's just so many crowds, and it's becoming less and less of a situation where you're able to find a time of the year that's a super low crowd time. It feels like the parks are just getting more crowded year over year, and so that was mentioned a lot. Similarly, waiting in line was mentioned a lot. A lot of people said that a con to going to Walt Disney World is that there is a lot of standing in line. Another con that was mentioned quite often was that the trip requires lots and lots of walking, which can be challenging for young children, it can be challenging for the elderly, but it can also just be challenging for an average, healthy, younger person too, because it's just so much walking. One of the cons that was mentioned probably most, or one of the most, was how exhausting Walt Disney World vacations are. So many families said for their kids and for them, or even when it's two adults, that those responders said the same thing, where it's so much walking. You're up at the crack of dawn, you're going to bed late at night, you're walking all day, you're moving all day, and so the exhaustion and how tiring Walt Disney World is was mentioned over and over and over again as a con. A few people mentioned that the weather can be a con for Walt Disney World, where if you're wanting to go during the summertime when your kids are off from school, or if that's a good time for you to travel, it's just so hot in Orlando. So that was mentioned quite often as well, is that the weather can be a major con. There were several Florida residents who responded and said that they really don't go to the parks in the summer because they're so crowded and so hot, and so that's a con for them as well. One thing that was mentioned on the Walt Disney World front that was both noted as a pro and a con was the advanced planning. So some people said they absolutely love the pre-planning, they love doing the advanced dining reservations, they love getting online and doing the fast passes and having their days all planned out. And then there were other responders who felt the exact opposite, and they felt like it was frustrating that you had to do so much planning ahead of time and all of that work, and you had to be getting online early in the morning and all of the things that come along with super planning your trip. So that kind of straddles the line depending on who was responding, but that was mentioned quite a lot too, was the advanced planning aspect to Walt Disney World, whether that was a pro or a con. Okay, let's move on to talking about the cruise. So we're gonna start with the Disney Cruise Line pros. So the things that were mentioned over and over that people really loved about the cruise. One thing that was mentioned a dozen times or more was the service, that the service is just unparalleled on the cruise. Several people said that they had been on other cruise lines and that Disney's cruise line service was far superior to the other cruise lines. That was something to note. A lot of people, like almost every single person out of the 42, made the note that one of the major pros to a Disney cruise is that it is so relaxing. And people had different reasonings for that. So some people said it was because they could put their kids in the kids club and then have adult only time. Some people said it was because everything was in one place on the ship. Some people said it was because you didn't have to get up super early, you didn't have to walk a whole lot. Some people said it was because it was was an all-inclusive vacation where you could get up and all of your food was taken care of and your stateroom was taken care of and all of the fun during the day and entertainment was already prepaid for. So that made it really relaxing. But that was a response that was highlighted and floated right to the top, was that people, when talking about pros for Disney cruise, said over and over and over again that it was so relaxing. And that was the top response for the pros to a Disney cruise. Also mentioned a lot was the food. A lot of people loved the food. A couple of people said something along the lines of it felt like going to a signature dining restaurant in Walt Disney World every night when they were on the cruise ship. So people really enjoyed that. It was mentioned, the shows were mentioned a lot as well, that the shows are just fantastic and they're so special and they're so amazing. And so the nightly shows on the ship were mentioned quite a few times as a pro to a Disney cruise. I touched on this just a bit already, but the families who had children mentioned over and over again that the kids clubs on the cruise were amazing. There was a lot of capitalization when talking about the kids clubs because people were so excited about them. So that sounded like for families with kids, people loved that their kids had these awesome kids clubs to go into that the kids loved being in, and then the adults got one-on-one time. So that was something that was mentioned a lot. A couple of people said things like it's just a first-class experience on the cruise. They really enjoyed that. A lot of people, like I said earlier, loved that the ship houses everything that you need, and so you're just kind of on the ship and it's just that all-inclusive, everything in one place kind of feeling. And then second to the relaxation point, which was mentioned so many times, many people mentioned how amazing Castaway Cay is, which is Disney's private island. And so many people made comments about how amazing Castaway Cay is, how there's no place like it, and how you can only get there on a Disney cruise. And so that's a huge pro of Disney cruising. Now let's move on to the cons. So the number one con was that it's expensive. A lot of people made the comment that Disney Cruise Line is just very expensive. Going on cruises of even short durations are very expensive. That came up over and over and over and over again. Several people mentioned seasickness as a con to a Disney cruise, because obviously if you or any member of your family or your entire family is dealing with seasickness, that can put a huge damper on your vacation. So that was mentioned over and over. There were also a lot of people who mentioned that you are confined to the itineraries and the ports and the dates that Disney is sailing and where Disney is sailing. And so it's less flexible in terms of choosing exactly when you want to go than Walt Disney World. Several people mentioned the weather again as a con to Disney Cruise, which was something that was also a potential con for Walt Disney World. And a lot of people said that, you know, your itinerary can be changed at the drop of a hat if there is a weather issue, which we experienced on our trip as well. So I know that that's true, where a port will get canceled or you'll have to move your trip around, which can bump excursions around and just kind of mess things up just a little bit, because obviously if there is bad weather, you aren't going to sail into it and dock there. And so that was definitely something that was mentioned quite a few times, was that the weather can change your itinerary and that's not always the best. The last con that came up quite a few times was that people said that there were less food options on the ship than in Walt Disney World. And so a few people said they didn't love the food on the cruise, but more people said something along the lines of there just weren't as many options and they liked the options in Walt Disney World and there just aren't quite as many on the cruise. So that's the overview of the main highlighted Walt Disney World pros and cons and Disney Cruise Line pros and cons. Those were the things. Obviously, out of 42 responses, there were others that were mentioned, lots of other pros and cons for each that were mentioned. But I just wanted to talk today about the pros and cons that floated to the top, that were mentioned over and over and over by people. Which leads us to the question, which one would your family choose? Which was my final question before I just said, do you have anything else you want to add? Now, the statistics are, I interviewed 42 people. 7 people said they would prefer to go to Walt Disney World. 18 people said they would prefer to go on a Disney cruise. And 17 people said that it totally depended on the kind of trip they were looking for, or they just didn't answer the question at all. So I'd marked that as undecided. So it was 7 people said that they would go to Walt Disney World if they were given the choice between the two. 18 said that they would go on a Disney cruise, and then 17 said that they were undecided or that it would depend on the type of vacation that they were looking for. So now that I have shared a plethora of information about what different people have responded and different people's thoughts. I want to share my own thoughts. If you have not already, then earlier I already linked to my Disney cruise vlogs, and I'll pop a link below to my Disney cruise vlog playlist. That way, if you want to go watch what we did for our 5-day and 4-night cruise, you can do that. So this is just my opinion. I pulled all these people's opinions together, and now I'm just sharing my opinion alone. So my family makeup is me and my husband when we are traveling. It's just the two of us. For me, the pros to Walt Disney World are that there are truly endless things to see and do. Between the 4 parks and then all of the resorts, which are basically like theme parks in and of themselves, all of the restaurants, all of Disney Springs, it's like there's so much to explore. To me, being in Walt Disney World feels like a huge adventure. There's just endless rides to ride, there's shows to see, there are things to watch, characters to interact with. It's just so much. There's so much to do, and I love that aspect of it. Because even though my body is moving and busy, I feel like my mind is just in a way relaxed because I'm just enjoying myself. I'm just making memories with my husband. We're just having fun, and I'm not worried about anything. I'm just kind of enjoying my time on this adventure through Walt Disney World. I really love the World Showcase in Epcot, which is obviously in Walt Disney World, and also Main Street in Magic Kingdom. Those two places just have such a special place in my heart, and there's just nothing else like them to me. The feeling of being on Main Street, or the feeling of meandering through the World Showcase after the sun has set and after dinner and just shopping and talking to the different workers and cast members. I just absolutely love that. And so to me, that's a huge pro to Walt Disney World. I also love the resorts in Walt Disney World. Like I said, they feel like their own theme parks, just each one. They're just so well themed. They're so fun to walk through. We love exploring them while we're on our trips. So the resorts are definitely a pro to Walt Disney World. Now let's move on to Walt Disney World cons. So for me, my top con is that there is just so much walking. I have scoliosis, and being on my feet all day like that and walking just all day really wears me out. It wears out my feet and ankles, it wears out my knees, it wears out my hips, my back hurts, it makes my neck, it's just, my whole body is a little bit off because I have scoliosis. So for me, walking all day is just exhausting. It's just completely exhausting. And so that is my major biggest con of Walt Disney World, is that to me, it feels like such an adventure and it feels like a trip, but in terms of my body feeling well rested, it does not. I do not feel well rested at all when I come home from a Walt Disney World vacation. In fact, on our last trip, we used a Fitbit and we had walked 18 miles in one day. So it's just a whole lot of walking, just so much walking. So to me, that's the biggest con. I did note though that at the end of our trip, even though we're exhausted, we're very happy. We're always really happy and feel really joyful, and our souls feel really rejuvenated and our minds do, and we just feel refreshed. But physically, we're pretty worn out by the end of our trip. My other two cons for Walt Disney World were that it is very crowded at times. Even we went this past year in January, and which is a very low time in terms of crowds, but it was still quite crowded on some days, and there were still quite a few huge school groups of 30 or 40 kids, and those groups kind of move through the park, and it's like, it's a little crazy when they're around. And then also another con for me with Walt Disney World was that the lines can get really long. And so waiting in line when you're on vacation is not always the most fun. So for me, crowds, lines, and how exhausting it is with all of the walking. Now, moving on to Disney Cruise Line pros. For me, everything was taken care of from the second that we boarded the ship. It truly felt like a luxury experience. We just felt so well taken care of. The service on a Disney cruise is far and beyond, in my experience, what I've ever experienced within Walt Disney World. That might not be the case for everyone, but for me, and there were quite a few other people who said the same thing, the service was just pristine. It was so amazing, and so that was a huge pro for me. I liked that there was a lot to do for adults on a Disney cruise. There were lots of adult-only sections. There were adult-only bars and pubs and clubs. There were adult-only events and activities all throughout the day. So there were lots and lots of opportunities to not be around a whole bunch of children, which really doesn't bother me, but in Walt Disney World, those same opportunities aren't available. My last two pros are that the shows on the ship are so amazing. I absolutely love them, especially Beauty and the Beast. and that Castaway Cay, there's just nowhere like it. Castaway Cay is just so magical and so gorgeous and so beautiful, and there's really just nowhere that I've ever been that's like that. So that's definitely a huge pro to a Disney cruise. Now moving on to cons. I agree that there are not as many food options on a Disney cruise as there are in the parks. You don't have to walk quite as far on the cruise, which is a pro, but there just aren't as many options. The parks just have so many options, and so many iconic options within the parks, like a Dole Whip or a Mickey pretzel or whatever else, the popcorn, which a lot of those things you can get on the ship, not a Mickey pretzel, but there is popcorn on the ship, and you can actually get a Dole Whip. You have to pay for it, but you can get one, at least on the ship that we were on, which was the Disney Dream. But it's not exactly the same, and so I did kind of miss having all of the different food options. Plus, throughout the World Showcase, there are just amazing food options. We love going to the different restaurants within the Epcot World Showcase, and those are not available on the ship, obviously. And so to me, the lack of food options, or the lower amount of food options, was a con when we are comparing and contrasting the two. Additionally, for me, a con with the Disney cruise was that weather heavily impacts your trip, and we saw that firsthand. If you have watched my Disney cruise first timers report, which was a very comprehensive video about our trip, I will link it above if you want to go check it out. I talked about the weather for each day of our trip, and it basically rained and thunderstormed on and off for our entire 4 nights and 5 days. We still had such an amazing time, but it heavily impacted our trip. There weren't as many opportunities to play in the pool and swim in the pool, and there weren't as many opportunities to even lay out in the sunshine, and we had our Castaway Cay day canceled and rescheduled, which messed up a few of our other plans. So the weather would absolutely impact a trip to Walt Disney World, but it completely changed our itinerary on a Disney cruise. So for me, that's a major con. And my last con on a Disney cruise when being compared to Walt Disney World is that you're confined to the dates and the places and the itineraries that Disney already has. Whereas you can basically create your exact personalized vacation with Walt Disney World. With Disney Cruise Line, you're going on and you're finding existing cruises that are available, and you're choosing one of those. So it's not as personalizable as Walt Disney World is. And now I'm sure you're all wondering, well, which one do you prefer? And unfortunately, I'm not gonna choose one or the other. I really am in that undecided category where I truly see such a benefit to both, and I see a reason why I would want to go to one and reasons why I would want to go to the other one. So for me, if I'm looking for an adventure, if I want to have lots to do, if I want to be moving and all of those kinds of things, it's always going to be Walt Disney World, because there's just so much to do, so much to see, so many rides to ride, awesome restaurants, so much to explore. I just love that aspect of Disney. It's just such an adventure to me. On the other hand, if I am in the mood to relax, it is Disney Cruise Line every time. Disney cruises, in my opinion, are so much more relaxing than Disney World. There's so many fewer people, you're not waiting in line, there are not crowds the way that there are in the parks, you're not getting up at the crack of dawn, you can sleep in, your stateroom is only ever like a 5-minute elevator ride and walk away, so if you want to go take a nap, it's so much easier than trekking across Walt Disney World. So they both have their place. I will also say that the seasons would impact, not always, but in a lot of times the seasons would impact which I would choose. So during the summer months, I would much rather go on a cruise, like 100 times more rather go on a cruise, because it's gonna be hot. I wanna be by pools all the time. I wanna be on beaches. I wanna be on a cruise ship. I don't wanna be waiting in line, and I don't wanna be fighting crowds. When it's colder, I would still go on a cruise, and I would love to go on a maritime cruise or an Alaskan cruise, but when it's colder, I absolutely love being in Disney. In fact, for the past 2 Januaries, we have booked our week-long Walt Disney World vacation in January for that reason. We just love the cooler temperatures. It's still crowded. There still definitely are crowds, but there's less crowds certainly in January than there is in June or July. And so we like the lower crowds. We like that it's, you know, just a little bit cooler, and it's so much easier to walk through. You can wear jeans and a sweatshirt and walk around rather than, you know, just being so hot. So we really do enjoy that. So the weather definitely plays a part for me. In the summer, hot months, I would much rather be on a cruise, whereas in the wintry months, to me, I love the idea of being in the parks. With the exception of late December when it's like craziness in the Disney parks, I don't have a super high desire to be there then. So there you go. That is all of the information that I compiled, plus my personal opinion, all put together for you. I hope this is helpful to you if you are researching the two or trying to decide between the two, because again, I just put such a high value on family vacations and time away together, but I also understand that there is a literal financial, monetary high value on any kind of Disney trip. And so to me, I just want everyone who is making those decisions to be, you know, well informed and to be able to make decisions for your family that feel right, that you're not going to regret or wish you had done the opposite thing. So I am going to put this entire document as a PDF linked below. So if you want to print this off and read through what everyone has said and what people's thoughts are on the pros and cons and which they would prefer and all of those kinds of things, feel free to click on that link below. I'm going to host the document on my blog, and you can go ahead and head over there and print it, and then that way if you want to just go through and read it, it would probably be really helpful to you, because you could find people who have a similar family makeup as you do and then maybe read what their thoughts are, because a lot of times the ages of children or things like that really affect the experience one way or the other. So if this video was helpful to you, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. This has taken me so much time. So I can't tell you how long it took for me to put this together. So I hope you appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if so. I would love to hear your comments below. If you have been on both but didn't have the opportunity to respond to my little survey on Instagram, I would love for you to share your thoughts below. As I mentioned earlier, I understand that the two are very different, but we're comparing them in terms of them both being Disney vacations. And so if you want to share your opinion, you're more than welcome to. Just make sure that you're super respectful and kind as you do it. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I will see you next time. Bye.